Tolvar Truestrike surged through the halls, a fury emanating from every step. Rage burned in his eyes as the haunting screams echoed through his thoughts. A door burst asunder at his mere presence, another was shouldered aside roughly. The academics had gone too far. 3 days, 3 days' helpless screams of some poor damsel had emanated from the lowest tier of this tower, and he was here to see justice done. His god demanded no less. The last door loomed before him, this one barred shut, stout, oaken, banded in iron, and yet it stood no chance before his holy wrath. He raised his gleaming blade high, and with a zeal and strength that only a paladin might possess, clove the door in twain. It fell, sundered into ruin. Tolvar strode through. Who is in need of my... Oh, hell. Oh, hell, literally. For Tolvar saw before him a woman of demonic descent, no mere tiefling either, some full-blooded demon of some sort, a succubus or a something, but manacled and chained, clearly underfed and tortured, perhaps. She looked up, fright, eyes wincing closed at the sudden onslaught of light. "Can you help me?" Look, I'm very sorry. But my first oath, I suffer not the demon to live. I have been held here for 3 days. I get it, I really do, but at the same time... Tolvar was conflicted. What could he do? His oath, it demanded that he kill her on sight, but clearly, obviously, she was the victim here. But what was a paladin to do? He wavered, torn between his unflinching resolve to see justice done and an oath that seemed to now be on the verge of having him murder an innocent. Look, I'll be back here tomorrow. You can't be here. I'm sorry. I wish I could do more. He clove the manacles from her hands and turned and ran, fleeing into the night. And as he did so, the glow and luster faded from his sword, his powers leaving him, at least until he could repent for his transgressions. Or maybe not. Hello! I am Kellendir from Kellendir's Corner. And today we are going to be talking about paladin oaths. Are they bad? Maybe. We'll see. Paladin oaths are super restrictive. If we look across the mainstay of fantasy, it's generally a pure binary. You follow the creed, and you're good with your god, and you deviate, boom. Turn off the lights, powers go bye-bye. But as we just saw in the example there, these oaths tend to be pretty inflexible. It's not unreasonable to think that a paladin is going to have an oath that somewhere in it states, "Suffer the demon not to live." That's totally paladin-like. And yet, there are many fantastical worlds where these things just aren't quite so black and white. And this is, I think, where we get to the crux of the issue. It's not so much that paladin oaths are bad, but rather the way we implement paladin oaths doesn't always give us the paladins we want, we need, or we deserve. So, we're going to look at a different option, a different way of implementing paladin oaths that is not this all or nothing affair. What am I talking about? Well, oaths made up of tiered articles, which is actually sort of interesting and drawn from a lot of historic precedent, and frankly, just the way oaths often work in the real world with business deals and contracts and whatnot. So what am I talking about when I say, well, let's have some articles in this oath and let's tie them into the paladin that way? Well, what even is this? Well, this idea takes the singular oath to a deity, a vow of obedience and subverting one's own will to become an instrument for said god, and instead replaces it with a system of specific oaths that you make. And if we're going to take a pen and paper setting, or even just a novel or whatnot, we can tie individual powers or systems of powers that the paladin gets to various articles in their oaths. So, what is the general toolkit of a paladin? Well, there are some things that seem to really stick out as being incredibly consistent across most paladins in media. First things first, some sort of supernatural evil sense. Paladins tend to have some ability to discern the evil influence of their deity's enemies. Now, whether this is the inherent ability to understand where demons and devils are, if a paladin always smells the undead a full day before they arrive, whatever it might be, paladins tend to be imbued with this preternatural ability to understand and detect evil, though often only supernatural evil. So that's the core baseline power. Secondly, paladins characteristically have some healing ability. Oftentimes, right, the characteristic lay on hands, where with a touch, the paladin goes and banishes injury and illness from whoever they're having mercy upon. Another classic ability. Then we have the paladin's ability to smite evil. Really hard to have a paladin without that, right? Uh-oh, I can sense evil. I found you, evil. Bam! Goodbye, evil. A paladin's smite is a very core part of their toolkit. And finally, they oftentimes have supernatural resistances. Whether it's directed against evil influence, like they're incorruptible, or oftentimes this translates to they can't be afflicted with diseases. Sometimes it's just a general robustness because they are infused with divine power. So we can go and we can take what is normally thought of as one oath and divide it up into various specific articles of an oath and tie these articles to different powers. We'll use Dungeons & Dragons as an example because it really helps illustrate the point. In this system, we'd go and initially, as you make a paladin and you get a couple of abilities, your ability to sense evil, let's say, and your ability to smite evil. Well, that means you have to start off with 2 articles in your oath. So the first one might be, thou shalt not suffer the demon to live. That gives you your smites. That makes sense, right? It's the oath is tying into the action. Don't let the demons live. You get smites. Oh, the smites that help you deal with the demons. Makes sense. Alternatively, a fun thing to do might be to reverse things. To gain the smiting abilities, perhaps the article that your paladin is required to take must have something to do with healing. The hand of healing must be extended to even the unworthy. Interesting. Could be fun. We give the paladin a new article each time they gain a new type of power. And when a paladin invalidates part of the oath, it goes and diminishes or excises completely their ability to practice that part of their power set. Until, of course, they repent and make up and, bargain with their god, whatever it is that particular paladin and their relationship with their deity goes and entails. This has the effect of allowing paladins with a lot more moral scope and complexity, where in a moment of crisis, a paladin might decide to follow their internal morals over their code and may lose a power and may then have to go and explain to their deity and give a reckoning for their actions. And potentially their deity might go and be like, no, that makes sense. That's fine. Yeah, sure. And restore their powers because they did the right thing. Alternatively, maybe it's a super strict deity and the deity goes, nope, you need to go on a pilgrimage. Go get me the holy conch of Mezeldamar or whatever. Fill it with pure spring water and burn it or whatnot. And then that's another quest that the paladin has to go on to restore their former powers. I appreciate the ability that this system has to allow for more variety and leeway in paladin morality, where you don't have the, what D&D players tend to call the lawful stupid dynamic. This allows for a lot more play. Another thing that you can do is make sure that the articles for these various oaths correspond to things that are important to the god in that setting. So a great example, we're going to use, I was thinking about Joaquin, but we're actually going to use Kol Koran. Kol Koran is an interesting god from the Eberron campaign setting of Dungeons & Dragons. Effectively, if I were to sum up Kol Koran, Kol Koran is the god of capitalism, with all that entails. If we were to make a paladin of Kol Koran, we'll name him Rand. Perhaps to gain his version of sense evil, which maybe we'll call it sense charity, he must go and embrace a principle of his oath. He must gain one of these articles. And we'll just say it's called Greed is Good, because we're making a character that everyone's going to hate. So, let's lean into it. That's a principle. That's the first article of the Paladin's Oath. He can't chastise somebody now for being greedy, or he can't act against a merchant's interests, because greed is good. So the smites that he gets from his god, he's going to need to take on another article. Well, what might we have as the DM looking in at this? What second article would we add to the oaths? Well, maybe it needs to be something aggressive. It needs to line up with the idea of smiting the unfaithful. So in this case, the charitable and the kind and the socialist. So perhaps the second article of the Paladin's Oath states, "Give not what one might afford through the sweat of their brow." Now your paladin has to embrace the concept that greed is good, and they can't give anybody things that person might be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and attain. You see where this is going. Obviously, sure, maybe we choose a less Sharn-centric example from Eberron, though in an Eberron campaign, that would be hilarious. And if any of you have played a paladin like that, I would love to hear about it in the comments. But by basing all of these oaths articles off of the god, we can make a paladin where the role-playing is actually really shaped specifically to the deity, which is something that I often feel is missing in a lot of pen and paper games. Especially, I would like to point out that 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons definitely diminishes the specific emphasis of a god's portfolio when compared to 3.5 Dungeons & Dragons, which had a huge number of portfolios and oftentimes a bit more involvement from the deities in terms of skills and abilities and whatnot that a DM might give a player, for example. Though, obviously, 5th edition has done a lot of other interesting things to Paladins, some of which are quite nice, but that's neither here nor there. So, what I would like you to consider is, what do you want to get out of your paladins? Do you want a bunch of lawful stupid goons running around who are tightly wedded to their oaths to the point where, frankly, they will abandon their principles, or over time perhaps erode their principles and conform themselves so tightly to the container that is their oath that they never dare step outside of it? Or are you, and is your story, better served by having somewhat more human, somewhat more relatable paladins who have a more varied ability to engage with the principles of their god, such as what I suggested here? But anyways, that is going to be all for me today. I hope you guys like that little take on paladins and maybe even decide to adopt it into your own games and your own stories at home. And it may be kind, not cruel, and may your fortunes be preposterously bountiful and your failures not at all reflect some of the current unfortunate circumstances in the world, and may you have a wonderful, just absolutely wonderful rest of your day. See you later.